Let's come to the next financial metric. Again, a very widely used metric, return on investment, also called ROI. So what question does that metric answer? It answers the question, which return does the company generate on its assets? It doesn't come as a surprise that it was a chemical company which actually decided to use this number rather than the return on sales to measure the performance of its different divisions. Why is that? Well, chemical companies have lots of assets, and as a controller, as a financial manager, I want to make sure that you as operating manager not only manage the profit and loss statement, but you also manage the balance sheet. It was DuPont 100 years ago which introduced this metric. And you can see here in the nominator, we actually stay on the same metric which we used for return on sales, which is EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes. Why? Because we would like to find out how your operations are doing. But we don't divide this number, EBIT now, by net sales. We actually divide it by the total assets. You can see this here, the blue part in the balance sheet. So the whole left side of the balance sheet. Now, we could discuss if we should really take the whole left side or if we should actually go in and say some of those assets are non-operating assets. So for example, cash. Is actually cash included in your total operating assets? That's something which you could discuss. If you, for example, want to discuss what the ROI of Apple is, we know the balance sheet of Apple is purely cash plus cash plus cash plus cash. So is this really part of doing a business which is selling phones and providing services to the client? If you want to know the true profitability of the Apple business, you probably should take out this cash, because really what assets you need for the business of selling phones, as we know, Apple doesn't own factories. That's one of the beautiful things of Apple, that for the operations, they need very, very little assets in there. So that's the reason why in some cases, people actually go in and divide up the assets into operating assets and non-operating assets. Most times, however, people just take the total assets and just assume that everything is somehow related to the core business. You divide your EBIT by your total assets. So have an example. If you've got an EBIT of 10, the same EBIT which we had in the return on sales, we divide this now by total assets of 100. And that would mean we have an ROI of 10%. Obviously, this is now a number you compare to your cost of capital. So how much does money actually cost you? Your weighted average cost of capital. And you would then come to the conclusion, if, for example, your cost of capital are 8%, but your ROI is 10%, that the company is creating value because the return on the assets is higher than what the money actually did cost you. Similar names, sometimes the ROI is also called return on assets. So what is the management idea here? The management idea here is clearly to widen the scope of the analysis, to not limit your view on the income statement, but to include the balance sheet. So if you measure somebody based on ROI, this somebody has an interest in not only selling high and buying low, but also to make sure that the operations are run with a limited amount of assets. So here you now entice the manager to do supply chain management, bring down the inventory, to think twice about big investments, because big investments increase your asset base, and everything else being equal, bring down the return on investment in there. Same thing about receivables. You have to think about when you collect the money. The earlier you collect the money from your customer, the lower actually your accounts receivable, the lower your asset base. So clearly here the manager now has more homework to do than just managing the revenues and the costs.